ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another edition of What's Happening. I'm George Binns, and I'm here with my co-host, Elliot Margolis. And we have as our guest this evening, the Executive Director of BevCam, our real boss, Walt Kosmowski. How you doing, Walt?
I'm very well, George. Thank you very much. And Elliot, good to see you as well on this hot, sweltery day.
Yeah, it's summertime again.
Yeah.
And this is what happens in New England every so often.
Yeah.
But really, I guess we want to talk about what's going on with BevCam. And you've been shut down since about the 1st of March when the high school shut down, and you lost access to the studio. How are you managing to keep things going in the meantime?
Well, that's a very, very good question. And let me kind of back up a little bit. You're right, George. I think it was about the first or second week of March when we closed down, along with a lot of other businesses and other entities in the state, per the mandate of the governor. And we reopened, I think it was the second or third week in June. And we opened on a limited basis with reference to observing protocols. So we are now open, but we are not open for taping in our studio facilities in the high school. If we are open, if you want to do some editing, and if you want to borrow equipment, we can stage equipment, and a producer can come in and get equipment. If you want to come into the studio, we require you to make a reservation or call us ahead of time and book a time. We don't want any walk-ins just to come in. And when you do arrive at the studio, we insist that a mask be worn, as of course a lot of businesses, a lot of locations require that. And we have a digital contactless thermometer. We take your temperature, and if the temperature is above 100.4, then you're denied entry. And we have gloves there that people can wear if they're going to be touching equipment and things like that. We have a touchless desanitizer with lotion in it as well. So we're prepared to have people in to do some editing. Although in a lot of not a lot, but in some instances, we've provided editing software or the wherewithal to use software from the cloud for some of our producers that didn't come in. So right now, that's the situation. Producers are producing programming like you are doing right now remotely. And they are sending us the files, and Matt Greenberg, who is the guy that programs our 3 channels, who works for us, gets that file, and we air the program. The nice thing about our software these days is that we can get people, producers or whoever, can send us video footage in almost any format, and our software can convert it to a format then that we can use in our server for broadcast, through Comcast. And right now, that's the situation as it stands. No decision has been made as to when we will actually open for studio shoots.
Well, is the high school going to open?
Well, if you've been following the meetings with the school committee, they voted last Thursday. Today is Wednesday. They voted. I think what they voted was that grades 1 through 4 would have half a day in classroom and half a day remote, and then grades 5 through 6 would have a couple days in classroom and then the other days remote, and 7 through 12 grade would be all remote. So the answer to your question is that the high school then would not have in-classroom instruction in any part of the high school. And I know that if you saw the report that the superintendent, Susan Chirachak, created, very, very comprehensive. They looked at all of the schools, the high school, the middle school, and all the grade schools, and they looked at the square footage of all the rooms, and they had scenarios. Okay, if we have to separate 3 feet apart, this is how many we can accommodate. If we have to spread 6 feet apart, it's a different number. And I think in the end, if you had to maintain certain social distancing, I don't think physically they have enough room for everybody, all students at all grades, to do in-classroom instruction.
That's, I mean, we really don't need to get into the education process, but it really seems to hurt education when you have to do remote versus teachers not being able to see the kids. And you have a lot of kids coming in to learn the BevCam stuff. How could they can't do that remotely? You've got to have hands-on, don't you? I mean,
yeah, you really do. Yeah, you really do have to have hands-on. Although we do have a couple of tutorials on our website on how to use some of our remote cameras. But you're right. In fact, once we got the news that that this was how the school department was going to address the classroom situation, we contacted the media teacher at Beverly High School, and Sean Fitzpatrick is his name, and asked him that very question you just asked, Elliot, and said, okay, what do you think you're going to do? You still have to teach media. How can you do it without hands-on? Or maybe first thing we have to do is create some videos in addition to what we have so that kids can practice. I mean, they can pick up equipment from us. The school also has equipment that we bought for them over the years, and they could lend that equipment out. The students could come in and we'd put it outside with their names on it, what have you. So we'd never come in physical contact with the students, and they could do their assignments or what have you. So these are some of the things that we have to work out with the media teacher to see just exactly how we'll handle that.
It's really strange how we have to restructure everything we've ever done before and create new models for education.
Yeah.
That's a difficult job for you as well as the teachers, I would imagine.
Well, we don't really, outside of the media students who are taught really by the media teacher, BevCam staff, as you know, Elliot, the media classroom is right across the hallway from one of the entrances to BevCam. So the first 5 or 6 classes of the year in a normal year, the teacher would give them classroom instruction, and they would just walk across the hallway into our studio, and my folks would give them hands-on training on camera and sound and lighting and directing and all of that other good stuff. They learn editing from their teacher. So yeah, it definitely is an issue. We're hoping that more of our public producers like yourselves will produce programming where they produce it remotely, just like you're doing, sending us the files. A lot of them have, for whatever reason, have not chosen to do so, although some have chosen to do Zoom like you have, and others are doing remote and sending us the footage. But we're back to only a small number of producers actually producing new programming like you are, and we are of necessity replaying some older programming that still has shelf life, that doesn't talk about certain dates that have gone by or that's time related.
How is the quality of the Zooms that we're doing compared to being in the studio?
Well, I'll put it this way. You know that when we send a signal, or when we send the programming from our server to Comcast and they broadcast it out, it's in standard def. So, and our cameras in the studio are high def, and the remote cameras we have are high def. So in essence, they dumb it back down again in order to broadcast it. And as you both know, this is a battle that local access TV has been having with cable access, with cable providers to allow us to broadcast in high definition. Because if you click through all the click through, that's an all right. If you do that, you see programming that's in high definition, it looks crystal clear, and they come to local access TV, and it's muddy. So no matter how well our producers' stuff is, their videos, it's dumbed down again when it's sent out to Comcast subscribers in Beverly.
Well, when you get into this kind of a situation where you're essentially competing with Comcast for the quality, what seems to be their problem? Are they just not ready to step up to high on the cable?
Well, no, they're not ready to step up to high def for local access television, because everything else that you watch is high def. Remember that cable companies, whether it's Verizon or Time Warner or Comcast, whoever it might be, they are required by federal law to carry our programming, and they're required by federal law, the Cable Act of 1984, to provide the wherewithal in terms of money for us to run our operation. That's where I get my budget, is every quarter per a contract that the city has negotiated with Comcast. We're in the last year of a 10-year contract that expires in 2021. I get the money from Comcast to run my operation. But Comcast, since we're non-commercial, there's no money. There's nothing that goes back to Comcast. We're like a cost sink. They have to give us money to operate, but they can't charge anything because there's no commercials involved. So they don't ever do surveys or anything like that, because it doesn't pay off for them. So this is a long way to answer your question, George, but every time someone is watching BevCam, that means they're not watching a commercial station where there's money involved, and they measure the viewage, and then they know how much to charge for commercials and stuff. So they would rather nobody watch local access. So therefore, they want to make local access as unattractive as possible. So therefore, rather than broadcast us in HD, which they could do in a heartbeat, they choose not to. And we've fought that battle. We've lobbied the state legislature, and we've had senators and congressmen who have co-sponsored bills that would require cable in Massachusetts to broadcast local access stations in HD. And some of those things have died in committee. Some of them, it seems like we're making progress. There are a few local access entities like BevCam in Massachusetts that actually do broadcast in high def. But oddly enough, they're primarily with a third tier provider called RCN. I don't know if you've heard of RCN, but they're like, it's like Comcast, Verizon, the two big giant gorillas, and then RCN is way down in the weeds. But they figure this is one way that they can maybe gain market share, gain subscribers, if they offered HD across the board.
What do you think is going to happen when the 5G starts to kick in? Will we still have a cable access?
Well, I don't see why not. And that brings up an interesting question, and that brings up another piece of legislation that is in the state. It's working its way through the committees in our state legislature in Massachusetts. Back when cable first started, in the early '80s, maybe late '70s, I'm not sure. It was really the only game in town, and the government through the Cable Act required them to give back to the communities. Now, that's a world that's like the dinosaur age of television compared to what we do now. As you know, the so-called over-the-top and things through the internet, Netflix, Hulu, all this other stuff. And so, conceptually, we're saying, and the Alliance for Community Media is saying that conceptually, there's no difference to what Comcast is doing through cable and these other entities are doing through the internet. They're providing this content, and so if Comcast and other cable entities are required to supply revenues and support for local access, why shouldn't these other entities? So, and that, I might say that legislation similar to that has actually passed in, I think, a dozen other states where these other over-the-top internet companies have had to pony up a certain percentage of their revenues, because that's the way they do with Comcast. They look at what is their revenue, and the max is 5% set by law. And then each city negotiates a contract. So it's always below 5%. So there is legislation that would require these other companies, the non-cable content providers, to also subsidize local access.
Well, you bring up an interesting point that we do shows, as Elliot and I and Gail, and also other producers do shows. In fact, you do shows. We were interviewing the candidates running for office or the incumbents who are already there. And I guess it's fair game to ask them, hey, when's this going to happen? And is there a policy of BevCam or a guidance from BevCam that says, hey, this is what we really want to happen, and these are the things that ought to be brought up when you talk to like a Jerry Paracella, for instance, or Joan Lovely?
Yeah. Well, you're absolutely 100% on track, George, and we have these conversations with these folks all the time. I might add that in Jerry and Joan Lovely, our state rep from Beverly and our state senator, are absolute fans of local access. I mean, I do a regular program, Beacon Hill Report, with Joan Lovely, and and I might add that our senator Markey is also a big proponent. When we had a press conference about that bill, he was right there with us, saying how much he supported that bill for both the high def and for the other internet entities to be paying to support local access. So yes, we do, and I might add that whenever there are national bills or there is a need to speak out, because as you know, right now the FCC is no friend of local access. In fact, one of the commissioners, O'Reilly, I think Dave O'Reilly's name, he has gone on record as saying that if he had his way, he would totally eliminate local access television. And the chairman right now of the FCC, his name is Ajit Pai, Agitpai. I think he's of Indian descent or Pakistani, I'm not sure. But anyway, he has that position, and he used to be a lobbyist and lawyer for Verizon for like a decade. So you're up against the way that the FCC works. There's 5 commissioners, and the party in power historically has gotten to nominate 3, and the other party has gotten to nominate the other 2. That's why some of this stuff that the FCC passed last summer that was an attempt to cut back on the money and the revenues that the cable companies are required to go to local access is as a result of those folks being really, they're in the pockets of the cable companies, who make unconscionable profits. Cable access, all the infrastructure is paid for. It just goes right directly to the bottom line. They make, and yourself that if you've had cable at home for the last 10, 15, 20 years, the average bill, I think, has gone from around $39, $40, let's say, to over $200, right? They just bump up their subscriber rates. Seemingly, they don't care. Everybody's saying, well, if you keep doing that, you're going to lose subscribers. But they don't. They don't lose subscribers. They lose a minuscule amount of subscribers. I think there's something like 71 or 72 million cable subscribers in the United States. And through all of this rising of prices by all the cable operators, I think that number has just gone down by maybe 0.5% or maybe 1%. So they're saying, gee, so what? We keep bumping up. Even if we're losing subscribers, we're making more revenue because we're charging more for the same service that we did last year.
Well, some communities have more than one company.
Correct.
Beverly only has Comcast.
Yes.
Do you think prices would go down if there was competition in Beverly? Or how would competition affect you and BevCam?
Good question, Elliot. And I'll answer very, very bluntly. The answer is no, because in other places where there's competition, the prices haven't gone down. In fact, they've just merely gone up. What we have, getting back to your question, we have been asking Verizon since I first almost started at BevCam back in 2004, 2005. We've been begging them to be the second provider in Beverly, and they just won't do it. And the mayor of the city has written them letters, and the city council has reached out to them and say, come into Beverly. But what Comcast, what Verizon did, Comcast is the big gorilla in Massachusetts. And what Verizon did around 2005, 6, 7, they started to expand their cable service in Massachusetts. And what they did is they cherry-picked certain communities around the state where they could get their best return on investment. So basically the bean counter said, here's your investment payback hurdle rate. It's this. And if the marketers and the program managers and said, okay, we can do that, then they went into those communities and started cable operations. But I think of the 351 cities and towns in Massachusetts, there's just a little over 100, maybe as many as 115, where Verizon actually went in and started up operations. I mean, communities like Worcester and Brockton, and I think even Boston don't have Verizon because their hurdle rate, there's one thing that the investment payback, but there's also the initial cost to get into a market as well. So they counted all this up and they said, no, we're not going in. And Beverly was one of those markets where they didn't think they could make the appropriate return on investment. So they just said, we don't care about Beverly as far as a market where we want to sell local sell.
When you say they go into a town, does that mean they have to come in, lay their own cable underground?
Not necessarily, George. That's a very good question. The law says that if there is already an incumbent that has laid lines and what have you, that a new entrant into the market can piggyback on their infrastructure. But they can't do it for free, so that the incumbent then would charge
An exorbitant
Charge.
amount to keep them out, yes.
I'm sorry, George?
They would charge an exorbitant amount to keep them out.
Well,
Yeah, I know how the game is played.
so yes, the answer is that, you know, they could come in and they wouldn't have to build out a separate whole infrastructure. They just use the existing infrastructure, but pay for it.
That's how you keep competition out.
Well, that could be one way of keeping competition out. And sometimes they don't even need to deal with that, as the scenario that I laid out before. They didn't even have to deal with that because the company themselves decided these are the markets we're going to go. I remember it clearly. I mean, I was at BevCam, and they just cherry picked. They had them all, you know, stack ranked from number 1 to number 100. They would go into this community, this community, this community, and Beverly was not on that list.
Well, that's the shining hope of 5G, that they can come in without having to pay that user's fee to piggyback, as you say.
Yeah.
But I guess the other question of, from your perspective, or how do you measure how effective or how useful BevCam is in the city?
Again, another very excellent question, George. You know, I've been doing this since about 2004, and people stop me and talk to me all the time. You know, they say, "Oh, you're that guy with the TV. You're Dan Rather, aren't you?" You know, but kind of like feeling the pulse of the community. I can just tell that since the early days, back in like the mid, 2004, 5, 6, that what we see now, a lot more people engaged and watch BevCam. Our Channel 99, which broadcasts which is the government channel, we have very, very high rates because we see people can come in via streaming, and also people can VOD it afterwards. And there's an awful lot of attendance live and people viewing it after the fact. And think about this as well. I don't have to tell you two guys that local newspapers are becoming a dying breed. They're folding tents, you know, all over the country. And for events that happen here, I mean, you guys know, you do it. You keep the community informed. You have an excellent show, so that if certainly Fox or CNN or MSNBC or CBS is not going to announce what happened at the last Beverly City Council meeting or cover what's happening at the school committee. Now, if you lose newspapers, and where are people going to go? They're going to go either the papers or local access TV. So, and if the newspapers are going away, I know that I get the Salem News at my house, but on Tuesday and Thursday, Tuesday and Saturday, they only have an online edition. The other newspaper in town is a weekly. So to answer your question, we provide a very legitimate and vital service to the community, and other producers that don't do topical news and political stuff like you guys do. They also, the Beverly Council on Aging, the library, the Red Cross, the Beverly Bootstraps, just to name a few. All these people produce shows on BevCam that goes out to the community. So the community, BevCam is really kind of like a focal point and a fulcrum where all this information about what's going on in the city gets to our citizens, and I'm proud of that. I'm very proud of that.
I'll tell you, when we have our annual meetings and we see a lot of the high school kids and what they've produced, to me, you provide a function that is invaluable to the kids. And you know, eventually you're going to see some of the kids on TV news or producing different shows on TV because of the instructions that BevCam has given them. and your staff is phenomenal. Good people, very helpful, very friendly. That's why I miss going in there. I mean, we have a great time, but they're extremely helpful.
Yeah, Elliot, thank you for that. Thank you very much for that. Yeah, they're a great group. And, I've had more than one producer tell us that they went out to other access stations. And I'm not going to mention any other access stations, but you'll get my point, and say that, we got less than a real hearty welcome over here, et cetera, et cetera. But when I came to BevCam, I felt like I was part of the family. And that's an attitude that I really espouse. And I make sure everybody feels welcome, and anything, any questions they have, we want to be, it's like they come as a part of a family. In fact, yourself that there's a lot of people that come in and hang out at the station during normal times who are there, and they're not producing a show, but they just want to come in and find out what's going on and chit chat and that sort of thing. So, Elliot, thank you very much for that, and I will pass that on to our guys. Thank you very much for that.
Speaking of your guys, there's a guy named Kim, you may probably be well aware of. Kim Allen.
Yeah.
And he keeps bugging me about these shows that you got to end them on time. And we've finally gotten to that point of we need to wrap it up. So, Elliot, you're on.
That was very clever, George. Very well.
Yeah, now
we're having fun with this. If you have,
yeah, we'll make Kim Alline very happy. Yeah.
Well, thanks for being on the show and explaining a little bit about BevCam. I think what you've done today is educate our listening public, our viewing public, about a little bit more about BevCam, and maybe we'll get more and more people to watch it. So we thank you for being a guest on our show, and I look forward to seeing you in person again.
Absolutely, Elliot. Yeah, and I must say that you are one of our favorite producers, and I think you guys have the record now for the most number of shows produced at BevCam.
Got to be number one at something.
Thank you all, and tune in next time.
All right, we'll see you guys.